Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 7813 HD in a 601 finish. So the 7800 series from Bommer is that very common, typical double-acting floor pivot, well, door pivot that's mounted in the bottom of the door that you will see installed in doors spanning the decades. My great-grandparents' home, built in 1942, had one of these pivots when the home was built, and as far as I know, is still there today. So I don't know how much earlier than that they go, but I know that clients, as they purchase this material, indicate that the design has changed over the years. I just spoke to a gentleman that replaced one from 27 years ago. This is 2016 now. And the prep remained the same. A very small amount of work that had to be done to fit the new one to it, that sort of stuff. But you can review that when you look at the documentation that we'll get into in a moment. So the 7813 HD specifically means that it is a heavy-duty HD, non-hold open, with a floor plate. So you can order these for different weights of doors, and the 13 in the HD version is for doors up to 150 pounds. You can order them for doors that are up to 90 pounds. You can order them, and I think that's actually the lightest, forgive me, the 7801 and the 7802 are 35-pound doors. So 35-pound doors, 90-pound doors, 150-pound doors. If you're dealing with a door that's going to be in a restaurant, kitchen to the serving area, I would probably opt for the 7813 HD. If you're going to be hanging a 3070 solid core door, that's the one that I would likely go with. You can get them with a floor plate only, or you can get them with a jam bracket. Now, not to give away the punchline of the joke, so to speak, this is the floor plate. A jam bracket would sit underneath this and then allow you to attach it directly to the jam. Why would you want that? Well, these holes that are slotted here, you may not be able to drill down into the floor for whatever reason. It could be the fact that you've got a floor that is quite costly to replace should there be a cracked piece of marble. Or it could be an installation where you cannot pierce into the floor. It might be a sanitation sort of perspective. Or you might just simply prefer to mount it to the jam rather than to the floor. So let's take a tour now that we know about the different types. Oh, and then the final thing, there's non-hold open and hold open. The 13 model is a non-hold open. If you want the hold open, there is no hold open in a heavy duty model. So there is no hold open if your door is up to 150 pounds. You can also do these. The trim plates are made of steel, except on two models, the 7821 and the 7822, that would feature brass base with a plating on it. Okay, let's take a visual tour of the items. Well, here's the business end. That is going to be the double-acting floor portion. You're going to have your spring. You're going to have this assembly here that is basically the shape of a bird's mouth, and then you've got these two rollers, and there's just too much tension on the spring to really demonstrate it. But as the door opens, those two rollers are going to force that bird's mouth portion to work like this, and then in the opposite direction as well. That action of the rollers pushing the bird's mouth piece will compress the spring, and that's how the double acting feature is going to work on this. Controllable spring. You've got this tension collar that's there, and indeed a tension rod is included where you can set the tension by inserting it there and turning it clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay. The 601, that means bright black japanned. Bright black japanned, and this will be available in all of the common finishes. Prime coat, 600 bright black japanned to 601. 603 is zinc. Your brass, your bronze, your chromes, your polished, your satin, your oil rubbed bronze. Bommer will entertain custom finishes. You might need nickel or maybe an antique nickel. They will occasionally accommodate that. Okay, so that's usually not a problem. There's generally a lead time involved, though, on those. There is always a lead time on those finishes, so keep that in mind. So your exposed parts will be in the 601 finish, bright black japanned. You've got 2 cover plates. They are identical. Return back on the edge of the door. You'll have your heel plate, and I'll show you where that goes in a moment. You're going to have your top pivot assembly, which will look like that. That's the header portion, and that is the door portion. The tension rod I already showed. Then you're going to have all your fasteners. The fasteners for parts that are concealed, your exposed fasteners, as are these as well. Okay. For the floor plate, for the face plates, and then for the top and bottom hardware. Thread cutting. Okay. Just inspecting the screws to make sure that they're correct. Yeah, okay. Now, like I said at the beginning, the Bommer 7800 series are incredibly common. It's more often to sell them when replacing an old one than it is to sell one in a new installation. But I think that's only because of how many that exist over the years, certainly. They're a great piece of hardware, very reliable, known to work extremely well. If you ever hear any creaking that develops over time, generally you're going to want to get in there and lubricate that. You can see that it's literally lubricated now, coated quite well. And, it's just all over the hands. You'll want to bring it back to a lubricated, perspective. I like to use like a 3-in-1 oil. You don't need very much. A small can, get in there with a few drops, operate the unit. A few drops. I like to put some paper towels underneath the door. Before I'm doing that, I like to leave them there. I like to pat the face of it so that I'm not having dripping oil on the floor. And that will bring it back to a reliable, quiet or quieter installation. You might also, put a little bit on the spring, but there's really nothing there you're going to need to lubricate. It's those moving parts that you're going to find. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer items that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website along with a link to the full-line catalog. And in that catalog, you'll see that the name Bommer is quite synonymous with all things double-acting hardware, hinge-related, whether it's double-acting pivots like this or double-acting spring hinges like their 3029 series. That is the hinge that's synonymous with double-acting spring hinges. A full complement of single-acting spring hinges. But you'll see in the catalog that they have a comprehensive offering of commercial, industrial hinges, lavatory hardware, and then some accessory hardware, gate springs. They'll manufacture steel bumpers if you've got a pair of doors and you're going to go through them with a cart because you're going from a shipping warehouse to a dock. They make that material as well, and that's all in the catalog. So if having a visual idea of what the hardware looks like, the video will end at this moment for that specific audience. The video will now continue on with a review of the installation instructions and the installation procedure, and they are included with your hardware. There are 2 links below this video. One is called Template, and the other is called Instructions. The link that we're calling Instructions is the document that's included with the hardware. The template link gives all of the, I think pretty much all the dimensional properties of the individual pieces of hardware, so I'm not going to beleaguer any of those points in this video. Now, the difference between the 2 documents does not appear to be of substance. There's nothing between the 2 that's crucial that you're going to miss on one versus the other, except those dimensional properties of the individual hardware, except for one crucial dimension that is only found on the template. The template has the undercut dimension from the bottom of the door to the top of the floor, which is 9/16. That dimension is fixed. It's important that it be adhered to. You have to have that dimension because, as is shown on, well, in lots of places, I suppose, on the installation instructions as well as the template, it is giving you the dimension from the bottom of the door and referencing how to mortise for this. But since this rests on the floor, that 9/16 is part of the overall prep of the door itself. If you were to need to change that 9/16, obviously you need to account for that when you are installing the hardware. So 9/16 is the crucial dimension for the undercut. Now the top of the door, your standard 1/8 of an inch, and that is indeed called out on the same template above, is your margin from the top of the door to the bottom of the header. So you're going to have your 11/16. So if you've got an 80-inch tall opening, your door height needs to be 79 and 5/16. 79 and 5/16 is your net door height. That's crucial. You have to have that. Otherwise, you have to adjust. Now, let's get into the procedure. The document that is called installation instructions will be the one that I'm referring to because that is the one that's included with the hardware. Step 1, and step 1 is generally the part of it that is the make or break sort of part in terms of step 1 calls for an 1.5 inch radius on the heel edge of the door, and you can sure do that on the other side of the door as well, on the pivoting side. So the question is, are you or do you already have an 1.5 inch radius or a radius quite close to that on the edge of your door? The template is based on having that margin. They're calling for a 1/4 inch margin from the edge of the door to the edge of the, from the jamb, the cased opening frame, to the edge of the door at 1/4 inch. On the opposite side, you can certainly cheat that to far closer to an 1/8 of an inch. So the next question in terms of door height, what's the net door width? So per the template, you're going to need a 1/4 inch over here, and let's just say an 1/8 of an inch over here because it's not given. But if you're radiusing both sides, both styles of the door, for sure an 1/8 of an inch. You don't need to have more than that. You can have more if you want, but you can probably even cheat it closer to a 16 or 3/32. So how do you accomplish that if you don't have it already prepped? And it's important to know that because let's say you have a 36-inch wide finished cased opening width. Your door net width is what you have to arrive at. Is it going to be 35 and 5/8, 1/4 and an 1/8? Or do you literally have to make those margins greater because you're going to have a square edge door? And that square edge door is going to require more room. And you're probably going to cheat it out to, you could probably make you could probably make a total of 3/8 of an inch for a square edge door. You might look to make it a little bit greater than that, have a 1/4 on either side, or at least a 1/4 on the opposite side. But that's also related to your door thickness. How thick the door is will also account for that. If there's questions on how to arrive at that, feel free to reach out to us. Now, let's proceed with, if you're not going to square the doors off, cut your door down smaller in the width, make a 1/4 inch on either side. I think that'll be substantially accurate for your application. Otherwise, it's radius the door. So if you're going to radius the door, you're going to need a tool, and you're going to need the round over bit. The way that I've always done it in a shop setting where you'll do them occasionally, but enough to have a tool set aside just to do it, I would have I don't remember what the exact diameter of the round over bit, let's just say 3 inch, a giant round over bit in a 1.5 fixed router where I've taken the base and I've cut the base out so I can fit this giant round over bit into, set the depth of the bit so that I'm right where my arc will be at the center of the door so that it makes a nice clean radius. Put your door down on the sawhorses and get your tool over on the right hand side and run one clean pass down. And clean, I mean don't tip the router at all. If you've got a large horsepower router with a huge bit like that, there's going to be a lot of force that's going to affect it. So when you flip it on, you want to make sure you've got good hold of it the first time. Get that set down nice on the base. And the door must be secured to the work area because when you've got that much of a router in terms of weight and the force and the pressure of what you're doing, the door cannot move. Keep the base flat on the door, and you've only got, technically less than half of the base. Nice and flat on the door, and move slowly but surely and continuously. Don't stop. Move, 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 keep moving. And when you get to the end of the door, don't push back. You don't want to unintentionally round over the bottom of the door. Just take it and exit clean and straight off. Pretend that the door is another 12 inches longer than it actually is, and just continue on down. I always make one more pass just to clean any sort of jittering that I might get of the router, but I never make more than two, because there's nothing left to remove. And anything you do beyond that's probably just going to take away from the quality of the work that you've accomplished. Take the door, flip it over, the same style on your face. Do the same to the other side. 2 passes, clean. Great. Now flip the door over this way. 2 passes, flip it over, and you're in great shape. If you're not going to do that, skip all of it. That's the bottom line. Make your margin greater. Step 2 is mortising the top of the door for the top plate. And everything on this Bommer template, and the first time that I did this a very long time ago, all I had to do was just follow the dimensions. And you follow the dimensions. However, or whatever tool you are going to use. I'm a fan of routers because they are the cleanest cut that you'll get. Sure, there is more upfront time, but the quality of the job at the end of the prep is well worth the investment in making a template. And if you ever had to do more than one, you already have most of the work already done with the creation of a template. So following the dimensions is what I'm driving at. That top prep, edge of the door to the center of the hole is 1.5 inches. What I like to do with a prep like this, laziness being on this, is I like to use a Forstner bit, quite frankly. 3 1-inch holes that I'm able to just drill only to the depth that they're calling out, which is incredibly minor, 5/32 of an inch. It allows me a real quick sort of prep, nice and clean. I'm not drilling very deep. It's just heavy on, at 5/32 of an inch. Just heavy on 1/8 of an inch. You just buzz it in a little bit. Make sure the prep is nice. Then drill your center hole, which they have called out at 5/8 at a depth of 5/8 of an inch. 5/8 hole, 5/8 deep, and that's for the top pin. I like to do the same sort of Forstner prep up in the header, because that is, while you're never really going to see it, a Forstner bit allows an incredibly clean cut, is the bottom line. But a flat end cut as well. However you go about doing it is great. Laziness drives my approach to this stuff, and it just happens that a Forstner bit is both lazy and exquisitely clean in its preparation. So you're going to prep the header and the top of the door for this material. Obviously pre-drill your holes for the screws that are included when you install. You would not want to crack anything. That's step 2, along with, there's nothing else involved in step 2. Step 3 shows prepping. I mean, there's other things in step 2 that you can just simply review. Step 3 calls out the preparation in the bottom of the door. And as I said before, if you just follow those dimensions, you're going to find it super easy. Now, using a router for this with a template is a challenge only in the fact that you'll make multiple passes with your plunge router, and then you're going to have to square out the corners slightly to get this hardware installed, especially the 3 5/16 dimension. That corner there you'll have to square out to get this plate fast to the style of the door. You'll see that there is an 1/8 of an inch deep, 1.5 inch groove that you have to account for, and that is, the design has changed. I'm saying you don't need that for this at all. There used to be a pin that would move in here as the door opened and closed. That pin is absent from this model. This design could have changed. I'm going to say you don't need that groove for the current model. If you have a pin that's up there and there's a slot, make the groove. Okay. Step 4 is going to help us with attaching it to the bottom of the door. You're going to use your unfinished screws that'll be in this package. for literally attaching your 2 screws here and here, your 1 little screw down here in the tab. They show a screw here as well that will secure it to the door. Before you go drilling anything, pre-drilling holes and attaching it, make sure you just have a nice, tight, fast, clean, flush fit to the bottom of the door. Once you do, attach it. So at this point, I should have said, attach this to the header, attach this to the top of the door, attach this to the bottom of the door, get the whole thing tipped into place as is shown in step 5. It's that simple. You're going to want to make sure the margins are correct on either side. You're going to want to make sure that you've done a reality check that the door is going to work properly. Mark your holes in the floor, remove the door, drill your holes, bring it back, secure it down to the floor, and then at that point you're done. There's nothing else to do. Now, my one... well, not that there's nothing else to do. There's almost nothing else to do. You're going to have your heel plate that is going to go over the edge here, and that has an 1.5 inch radius on it. You are going to attach it as so. Now this hole is not tapped, and that's because the 1224 screw that's in the package is what they call thread forming. It will be difficult to put it in. There are instances when someone wants to tap the hole. I say that's the way to go. But it is a thread forming screw, so you know, it'll be tough to get it in, but it goes in that way. These 2 holes are to secure it to the edge of the door. So your heel plate, then your face plates, and I was about to say my one issue with the hardware. I was putting that together wrong. That's going to cover that, so you get a nice clean fit over the edge. I don't have it exactly positioned correct naturally. Okay, but the face plates have 4 holes each, and you don't need 4 holes each. You need only the top 2, but they obviously do that for, you know, so that there's not lefts and right and left plates. So top holes only in the plates is what you'll do. So you'll have these holes that are unfilled. That would be my one and only reservation about the piece of hardware. At that point, you get your heel plate put on, your face plates put on, you're literally done. You should be able to, you will be able to expect years of maintenance-free, trouble-free sort of operation. If using it in a restaurant, very common. Using it in a residential application between a dining room and a kitchen, very common. The Bommer 7800 series pivots, I like those a lot because the weight of the door is resting on the floor. And in my opinion, letting Mother Earth carry the weight of the door or the floor, I should say, is the way to go with hanging a door rather than attaching something to the jambs. Okay, I think it's a slightly more elegant way to handle the door versus surface-mounted spring hinges, which are louder because you've got those plates that are literally clanking against each other. Not that it's an issue for me, but it may be for you. And I find, of course, the 7800 series quieter in terms of operation. I had mentioned earlier about the link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all the Bommer products that we sell, a link to the manufacturer's website along with a link to the product catalog. Feel free to review that. I would absolutely, if you were designing something from scratch, grab the product catalog, do a find function on your keyboard, type in 7813, and get to that section and review everything Bommer related before you make a final decision. Okay? My name is Rich Howard. If there's any questions on the hardware, any questions on Bommer, any questions on preparation of the door for this material, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.